In this video, I'm going to be telling you how to master the Buddha fruit and why it's the best fruit in Blox Fruit's history. Starting off, let me give you some background info about the Buddha fruit. This fruit was released in January 16, 2019, all the way back when the game first started, literally in Update 1. This is a beast type fruit, which means it has a transformation, and it costs a total of 1.2 million belly to buy, or you can buy it directly from the Blox fruit dealer for a total of 1,650 Robux. If you buy this fruit from the Blox fruit dealer, then you're going to have it permanently, which means you can switch back to it anytime you want just by talking to the Blox fruit dealer again or opening up your shop menu. Just like any other fruit in the game, you get a set of abilities when you eat this fruit. But unlike the other fruits in the game, the abilities aren't actually what makes this fruit good. Well, most of them aren't at least. The very first ability of this fruit is a transformation ability, where you transform into a Buddha. And this is what the transformation looks like. It's pretty basic, it makes your character a lot bigger, and flashbangs the crap out of you screen. The next ability that you unlock is the impact ability, where you basically smash the floor with your fist, and you deal a small amount of damage to everything that's around you. Then we've got the C ability, which you can unlock for 100 mastery, and for this one, you just jump and your character kind of just belly flops on the floor. Next up, we've got the V ability, and this one has a 200 mastery requirement, where you kind of just explode yourself, dealing damage to everything that surrounds you, and this move has a 0.5 second charge. But like I mentioned before, most of the abilities of this fruit are very much useless, and those abilities are the X ability, the C ability, and the V ability. And you might be wondering, how is the transformation of this fruit the only ability that's actually useful? Well, when you transform, you actually get two separate power-ups. The first one is that you receive a 40% damage reduction, which makes it so that you can tank a butt ton of damage, because 40% of it won't actually apply to your health. And the next ability that you get is the range. But the range that you get with the Buddha transformation is extremely overpowered. It increases your normal range by 5 times, which means you can hit people without your fist actually touching them. And this range buff works with every single fighting style in the game and every single sword. And also kind of works with guns, but it doesn't really matter because you can already hit people at a long range with guns. And this is the reason the Buddha fruit is the best grinding fruit in the whole game. And to master it, you have to choose a specific fighting style or a specific sword, which I will mention later. But now let me tell you about the stat build. The way that you're supposed to use your stat points to get the maximum effectiveness out of the Buddha fruit. The first build that you can choose is the damage build, and this means you have to put about 75% of your stat points into your melee stat and only 25% into your defense. The reason you're going to want to put 75% into your melee is because your melee actually increases two things. The first thing that increases is your fighting style damage, and the second thing that increases is your energy. And energy is extremely important. That's why having your melee upgraded is a must. And the reason you only need 25 stat points in your defense is because you already have a 40% damage reduction from the fruit's transformation, which means you're already not going to be taking that much damage. And even if you do, you have the reduction. And when you're using the Buddha fruit, you're fighting people at a long range anyway, so the only reason you'll be taking damage is that if they have long range attacks or a gun. You can edit the build to your liking. Some people like to put 90% of their stat points into their melee and only 10% into your defense, but then you're kind of playing it risky. So now you pretty much get the idea. You can kind of just choose for yourself. There's another stat build that you can have while using the Buddha fruit, and this is the 30% melee, 30% defense, and 40% sword. But only use this if you're actually planning to grind with the sword, and you can obviously adjust the stat points based on your liking, and you can obviously adjust the percentage based on your playstyle. You can put more stat points into your sword, remove a few stat points, more into your defense, more into your melee. You can choose pretty much whatever you want. I'm just giving you a basic idea so you know where to start from. Now I'm going to be telling you about the best fighting styles or swords that you want to be using when you have the Buddha fruit equipped. For fighting styles, it's extremely straightforward. There's only two fighting styles that you should really be using when you have this fruit. The first fighting style is the water kung fu fighting style, which you can find in the first sea, and there's no level requirement to achieve it. The only requirement for this is 750,000 belly. Then you have to head to the underwater city, follow this exact route, and then you can walk through this wall right here, and boom, you can talk to the teacher and equip the fighting style from him at any time. And if you're in the second sea or above, the fighting style that you want to be using is Sharkman Karate. But unlike water kung fu, this is a lot harder to get. First of all, you do have to be in the second sea to get this, and second of all, there are a bunch of requirements. The first one is that you need to have a 400 mastery on water kung fu. You need an item called the water key, which you can get by defeating the tidekeeper at the Skull Island, which is literally the final island in the second sea, so you already know he's going to be powerful. And on top of that, you need a total of 2.5 million belly as well as 5,000 fragments. Once you've got all of these items, you can go talk to this NPC called Dyrock the Sharkman, who's located right next to this house. He's going to sell you the Sharkman Karate fighting style. And the reason that Sharkman Karate and water kung fu are really good for grinding is because they have no delay between their M1 attacks. And when you're using the Buddha fruit, the only thing that you're relying on is your M1 attacks, because those are the only things with the increased range. And what I mean by no delay is that you're going to notice that when you use most fighting styles in the game and you spam your M1, there's going to be a short delay after the third attack. If you're using water kung fu or Sharkman Karate, it actually does not have this delay, which means you can punch your enemies a lot faster. So even though there's fighting styles in the game that do more damage than Sharkman Karate and water kung fu, you ultimately end up doing more damage with this fighting style just because of how frequently you can use this attack. The next thing I'm going to be telling you about is the swords, and the best sword that you want to use for grinding in each sea. If you're in the first sea with the Buddha fruit, then I recommend getting your hands on the triple katana. You can buy the sword at the frozen village for the total price of 60,000 belly. But keep in mind, this is only really good for the first sea. Once you get to the second sea, you should be switching your sword. In the second sea, you should get your hands on the true triple katana. This sword, unlike the triple katana, is a lot more difficult to get because you need 3 other swords. You first need to get the Sadi sword, then the Shisui sword, and last of all, the Wado sword. And each sword costs a total of 2 million belly. Once you do that, you have to get a 300 mastery mastery on each of those swords. Once you've finally completed all of that, you have to head into the green zone, head to the highest vine. Once you do that, you're gonna find an NPC called the Mysterious Man, who's gonna sell you the true triple katana for 2 million belly. Once you do that, you're gonna get one of the best swords in the whole game to grind with. But there's one sword that's a lot better, and you can only get this one once you enter the 3rd sea. And this is the cursed dual katana. To get this sword, you first need to get the Yama and Tushida sword, which makes it slightly easier than the true triple katana because you don't need to get 3 swords. Once you get the Yama and Tushida sword, you need to have a 350 mastery on both of those swords. Once you finish that, you have to complete the cursed dual katana puzzle, which you have to be at least level 2200 for. Once you finish that puzzle, you'll get your hands on the cursed dark blade. Now that I've talked about the swords and the fighting styles for the Buddha fruit, I'm gonna be telling you about the best race to choose. And really, when it comes down to it, there's really only 3 races that you want to keep your eye on. The first race is the cyborg race, because when you upgrade it to its V3 form, then you get an ability called Energy Core. And what Energy Core does is pretty amazing. It basically gives you a 30% damage reduction, and if you add the initial 40% damage reduction from the Buddha transformation, then you're gonna have a 70% damage reduction. This ability only lasts 6.5 seconds and has a 30-second cooldown. And those 6.5 seconds might not seem like a lot, but when you're doing stuff like raids and fighting bosses, this is gonna help a butt ton, because you're gonna be able to tank a butt ton of damage. The next race that you can use with the Buddha fruit is the shark race. With the V3 of the shark race, you get an ability called Water Body, which gives you a 65% damage reduction. And with the 40% from the Buddha, you get a 95% damage reduction. Just think about how crazy that is. You're only going to be taking 5% of the damage that you would normally take. This ability sadly only lasts for 4.5 seconds and has a 30-second cooldown. This race, in my opinion, is the best combo if you want to be fighting bosses, raid bosses, or even players. The final race that you can choose with the Buddha fruit is the Ghoul race. You get an ability called Heightened Senses with the Ghoul race, which increases your damage by 5%, your speed by 10%, gives you a total damage reduction of 55%. It lasts for 8 seconds and has a 25-second cooldown. This is going to let you take a lot more damage than you can normally take. And the most overpowered thing about using the Ghoul race is that you unlock a 5% life leech ability, and you only need the V2 version for this. And this is honestly the most overpowered part about using the Ghoul race. While the Shark race might be better for bosses, the Ghoul race is the best overall because you don't need to use a special ability that you can only use every 30 seconds. This is permanent, and that is the 5% life leech that you get, which means every time that you deal damage to an NPC, you gain back 5% of the damage that you do, which is honestly really overpowered because even if you get hit, you can quickly regenerate that health. That's pretty much it for the races. Now let's get into the Awakened Buddha, which is a better version of the Buddha fruit. First, I'm going to be telling you how to awaken your Buddha fruit. One thing that you absolutely do need is friends and help, because doing a Buddha raid by yourself is incredibly difficult and you cannot get it done unless you're a pro. The reason for that is because you're going to have to fight an NPC with the Awakened Buddha while you have your normal Buddha. Once you have your friends, you just have to head over to the raid place, which is this huge factory on the 2nd sea. Once you do that, you're going to have to enter a specific code, which is red, blue, green, blue. And then a door right here is going to open. Then you have to climb up the ladder and you can talk to the NPC. He's going to ask you to trade a physical fruit or 100,000 belly to get the Buddha raid chip. And just make sure you choose the correct type of raid. Once you have that completed, you should be able to do the raid, and make sure you finish the raid while having the Buddha fruit equipped, or else it's not going to count. And also make sure you finish it before the timer runs out. That's a pretty important thing as well. Now I'm going to be telling you about the moveset for the V2. Like I mentioned before, the abilities for the Buddha fruit are honestly really irrelevant. But one thing you should know is that the Buddha's transformation gets a lot bigger once you awaken the first ability. And you only need 500 fragments for this. And you also gain a passive ability which deals damage to everything around you when you jump. It doesn't do much damage and has a 2-second cooldown, but it's honestly still a pretty cool ability to know about. Next up is a really useful glitch that you can do with the Buddha fruit that's going to make your grinding life a lot easier. And this is the big item glitch. It's basically going to let you get the powers of the Buddha fruit without actually having to be in transformation. This is going to help your butt ton when you're grinding indoors. A good example of this is the curse ship. To go over this arch, you need to keep untransforming, which is honestly really annoying. So if you're doing this glitch, then you'll never need to do that. And the way you do the glitch is honestly pretty simple. First, you need to know what fighting style or sword you're going to use with the Buddha fruit, because you can't change it after you do this glitch. Once you know what you're using, just use that transformation ability of the Buddha fruit. After that, simply untransforming, quickly switch to whatever you want the glitch used on. Once you do that, you're going to know if you did the glitch right, if you can hit people from really far away, or if your weapon's really massive. The next passive ability that you get with the Awakened Buddha is the ability to walk on water. Normally when you walk, or should I say swim on water, you take a lot of damage. Well, if you have the Awakened Buddha, then you can just walk on water without taking any damage, which is honestly really useful. And you can even use your dashes. When you're in a raid, just dash over to the next island instead of taking a boat, because it's a lot faster. Another pretty cool thing you can do with it is actually find out the max range. If you tilt your camera all the way down, you're gonna notice this big circle around you with the Buddha fruit. And this circle is an actually cool effect. It actually shows you your maximum range with the fruit, which can be kind of helpful if you want to kill specific enemies without aggroing other ones. And finally, one of the most useful accessories that you can use while having the Buddha fruit. This goes for the unawakened version as well as the awakened version. This is the Ghoul Mask, the best grinding accessory in the whole game. It gives you a total of 500 energy, 10% life leech on melee attacks against players, and a 2.5% life leech on melee attacks against NPCs, as well as a 35% movement speed buff, which means you can use this to kind of just speed blitz your enemies if they have low HP. And you can also regain your health if you lose any with the 2.5% life. It might not seem like a lot, but when it stacks up, it gets really overpowered. And if you pair this with the Ghoul Raid, your life leech is going to be way higher. The way you can get the Ghoul Mask is by talking to the El Perro NPC. And to get this, unfortunately, you do have to be in the 2nd sea. And the place the NPC is located at is in the curse ship. All you have to do is head over there, and then you can buy it for 50 ectoplasm. You can get ectoplasm by destroying NPCs on that curse ship. That's pretty much it for the fruit.